Gene Hackman wasn't just a Hollywood legend. He was a force of nature. With unforgettable roles in The French Connection and Unforgiven, he defined an era of cinema. But after 4 decades at the top, he vanished without a grand farewell, without a final bow. No press tours, no tributes, just silence. And behind that silence lies a story of secrets, betrayals, and a life carefully hidden from the world. In this video, we uncover the shocking truth behind Gene Hackman's mysterious death, the hidden financial struggles he left behind, and why Hollywood, and even his own family, seemed to erase his legacy. Was it simply old age, or is there a darker secret lurking beneath the surface? If this fascinates you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, leave a 0. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more mind-blowing revelations. Gene Hackman's daughter now whispers eerie words, as if unearthing the crumbling remains of a legend who once ruled Hollywood. No dramatic sorrow, no heartfelt tribute. Leslie Hackman's strange, unsettled reaction sent shockwaves through an already fractured family, fueling speculation and turning relentless reporters into predators circling a long-buried secret. Hackman was found lifeless in a cold, desolate house, the air thick with toxic fumes. But the real shock wasn't his death. It was the 2 decades of silence, shattered the moment Leslie finally spoke. The daughter who once remained in the shadows has now become the key witness. But instead of grief, every word she utters cuts like a blade, exposing a grim truth no one dared to face. Leslie Hackman isn't preserving Gene Hackman's legacy. She's dismantling it, turning it into a ghost of what it once was. Behind her icy gaze and cryptic statements, she harbors a chilling secret, one that threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew about her father. Gene Hackman, once the undisputed king of Hollywood, dominated the silver screen with unforgettable performances in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Bonnie and Clyde, and Superman. His face graced the covers of elite magazines. He walked red carpets under blinding lights, and he reveled in the applause of millions. But after 2004, he vanished without a farewell. No grand retirement speech, no final bow. He never returned for award ceremonies, never stepped onto a press stage again. It was as if Hollywood's legend had simply evaporated, his name fading into anniversary retrospectives and lists of stars from a bygone era. He withdrew even further, letting time erase his own legend from Hollywood's dazzling spotlight. Seeking solitude, Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, 31 years his junior, found refuge in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Their $3.8 million retreat, hidden among the towering mountains, became their world. No red carpets, no flashing cameras, just the 2 of them, 3 loyal dogs, and the quiet rhythm of days slipping by, far from the chaos of fame. Neighbors in Santa Fe rarely saw Hackman venture out in the mornings. Instead, he would sit on his porch, a cup of coffee in hand, staring silently at the distant mountains. The once commanding presence in a sheriff's uniform had faded into that of a frail old man, his deep-set eyes carrying unspoken secrets. His life felt like an old film stuck in slow motion, each memory, each forgotten scene flickering behind his closed eyes, replaying in an endless loop of the past. Betsy Arakawa, once met with skepticism by Hackman's family, ultimately became the one who stood by him the longest. She cared for him with the precision of a seasoned nurse, ensuring every pill, every meal was in place. But was her devotion truly unconditional love? Or was Betsy, like their secluded Santa Fe home, a sanctuary on the surface, yet a silent prison where Hackman's loneliness grew, unseen and inescapable? Close friends who visited Hackman noticed a profound change in him after he withdrew from Hollywood. He spoke sparingly, avoided any mention of his career, and never rewatched his own films. Any new script that found its way to him was swiftly dismissed, often by Betsy before he even saw it. In a rare interview, Hackman admitted, "I haven't watched my films in years. They're part of the past. They don't belong to me anymore." For 2 decades, from 2004 to 2024, Hackman lived like a ghost. His presence fading, his name whispered only in nostalgia. No grand events, no red carpets, no interviews. The world caught a rare glimpse of him in 2023 when paparazzi snapped a photo of Hackman and Betsy at a modest seafood restaurant. He looked frail, his frame thinner, his steps unsteady as he clung to his wife's arm. Yet, even in that fleeting moment, the same piercing intensity that once dominated the French Connection still flickered beneath the years. Neighbors recall that Hackman's house remained mostly sealed off, its silence rarely broken. But on certain late nights, faint arguments could be heard drifting through the walls. No one knew what was said, only that Betsy always seemed to have the final word. An eerie presence surrounded the home, an unspoken tension that made people uneasy, as if the walls themselves held secrets too heavy to be revealed. For 21 years, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa vanished from the public eye. Their absence became a velvet curtain, sealing off the final act of a legendary career while igniting endless speculation. Some believed Hackman spiraled into depression after leaving the spotlight, while others whispered that Betsy kept him isolated, controlling his fortune from behind closed doors. Whatever the truth, Hackman embraced the silence, as if he were erasing his own name from Hollywood's history. In Hollywood, vanishing didn't mean being forgotten. But for Hackman, it was a deliberate choice. He rejected interviews, ignored invitations, and even declined a Lifetime Achievement Oscar. To many, it was baffling. Why would a man who had given his life to his craft turn his back on it completely? His silence wasn't just withdrawal, it was a warning. No one who spent 40 years in the spotlight could simply fade away without a trace. What was he hiding? A buried family secret, a shocking will, or a pain so deep that not even his first wife, Faye Maltz, or his 3 children ever knew the truth? When the late-night call came from Santa Fe police, reporting 2 lifeless bodies found in separate rooms and a mysteriously deceased dog, the whispers of suspicion that had lingered for 21 years exploded into a storm. Gene Hackman, once a towering force in Hollywood, was now reduced to a name on a coroner's report. The silence that had shrouded his final years was only the prelude to something far more sinister, an unraveling tragedy that left his daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, trembling as she clutched his will, tears slipping down her face. The winding dirt roads leading to Gene Hackman's secluded estate on the outskirts of Santa Fe carried an eerie, almost forgotten stillness. Unlike California's golden glow or the crisp air of the East Coast, the high desert sun cast a weary, faded light, one that felt less like warmth and more like a silent witness, waiting for something to crumble. Perched atop a lonely hill, Gene Hackman's million-dollar estate stood in silence, guarding secrets that no one dared disturb. Neighbors rarely caught a glimpse of the couple. No casual strolls, no weekend gatherings, no visits to the local church or lively farmers' markets. When Gene and Betsy did emerge, they were nothing more than fleeting silhouettes, slipping past watchful eyes before vanishing behind the towering iron gate. They say that at dawn, when the sun barely crept over the mountains, Betsy would slip outside with the aging dog. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the quiet surroundings, as if dreading unseen eyes upon her. The dog's slow, heavy steps seemed to mirror the weight of something unspoken lingering in the air. Less than 15 minutes later, she would return, carefully latching the gate behind her, her touch light, almost reverent, as if she feared disturbing the restless ghosts within Gene Hackman's home. As Gene Hackman's heart grew weaker, his world shrank to the confines of his home. The only outsider who crossed the threshold was a middle-aged delivery woman, her face etched with quiet sorrow. She never lingered, only muttering a few words before leaving. Once, in a hushed tone, she confided to a neighbor, "They're hiding something big that no one knows." Betsy Arakawa, fiercely private, kept her distance from the world. Aside from Gene, she had no close connections, only the silence that clung to their secluded home like a shadow. But a neighbor living just beyond Hackman's fence noticed something peculiar. Betsy often made hushed phone calls in the backyard. Her voice was too soft to make out, but now and then fragments slipped through the trees. "He's getting worse. No, we can't let anyone know. This house isn't safe." The calls always ended the same way, with a long, weary sigh as if she carried an unbearable weight. Who was on the other end? A family member? Or someone who held the Hackman family's deepest secrets? No one knew. But as the calls became more frequent, the worry on Betsy's face only seemed to deepen. Gene Hackman's home, once hailed by the media as an architectural marvel nestled in the wilderness, carried an unshakable chill for those who stepped inside. It wasn't the cold of the desert air or the design. It was something deeper, an unspoken sorrow that clung to every corner. The walls were lined with countless framed photos, yet not a single one featured Hackman's 3 biological children. Instead, only images of him and Betsy remained, a carefully curated collection of their travels, as if the past had been deliberately erased. Hackman's children, once laughing and playing in the backyard of his Los Angeles home, had long disappeared from his life. He never spoke publicly about his health, but whispers among neighbors painted a grim picture: heart disease, arthritis, spinal degeneration. Yet the most harrowing affliction wasn't physical. It was the slow, creeping curse that haunted Hollywood's aging legends. From Marlon Brando to Katharine Hepburn and Greta Garbo, the greatest icons of the Golden Age faced the same cruel fate, fading into obscurity while still alive. For Hackman, a former box office titan whose name once guaranteed success, watching himself become just a footnote in film history may have been the most devastating illness of all. Betsy once shared in a rare conversation with a neighbor, "Gene doesn't watch his old films. He says they belong to another life." With those words, Hackman severed his final tie to Hollywood, leaving his past behind like a forgotten script. But every night, as the house fell into silence, Betsy would catch glimpses of him by the bedroom window, staring at the distant mountains, murmuring to himself. Those whispers weren't the wind or mere illusions. They were fragments of unfinished conversations between Gene Hackman and the man he used to be. The one who once stood beneath the blinding lights, believing his reign would never end. But when the doors closed and the Hollywood glow faded, all that remained was an aging man, lost in his $1,000,000 home. And beyond the iron gates, the world moved on, unaware that Gene Hackman still lingered, his whispers the only echo of a legend waiting to be remembered. The once secluded $1,000,000 estate in the New Mexico hills, a place that had concealed whispered secrets and hushed midnight calls, now stands as a chilling crime scene. Red and blue police lights flicker against the adobe walls, casting ghostly shadows into the night. Neighbors gather behind wooden fences, their whispers blending with the desert wind, trying to piece together the mystery unfolding inside a home that had been silent for so long. The police don't storm in because of frantic calls or piercing screams. Only the unsettling stillness had drawn them. It was the drug dealer, a weary-faced woman from down the road, who first noticed it, that unshakable stench. Not just decay, not just chemicals, but something far worse. An odor that clung to the air, warning that whatever was inside had been waiting to be found. When the door swung open, investigators weren't met with the chaos of a violent crime scene, but something far more unsettling: absolute silence. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa lay in separate rooms, their bodies in different positions yet bound by the same eerie fate. Hackman rested on his back atop the bed, the blanket neatly pulled to his chest, as if he had simply drifted off after a long, weary day. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly parted. Not a single bruise. No signs of struggle, no indication of pain. Just the unsettling stillness of a man who had vanished from the world, leaving only silence in his wake. Just a few steps away, Betsy Arakawa was slumped beside the bed, her lifeless body frozen in an unsettling final moment. One hand still clutched the landline phone, one of the few remnants of their early years in the house. The screen showed no record of an outgoing or incoming call. Had she tried to reach someone? Had she realized too late that something was terribly wrong? Her vacant eyes remained locked on the window, where the last traces of evening light clung to the horizon, as if she had been staring at something just beyond the glass, when death arrived. When the police arrived, Gene and Betsy's 3 dogs were still in the house. 2 were alive, trembling beside their owners' lifeless bodies, their red-rimmed eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. But the oldest dog, the one Betsy had walked every morning, was dead in the hallway between the 2 bedrooms. No signs of struggle, no blood, no wounds. It looked as though it had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. But why did 2 survive while 1 did not? Was the gas not strong enough to kill them all? Or had something happened before the fumes filled the house? A tragic coincidence or a deliberate choice? The forensic team quickly inspected the heating system, gas lines, and appliances, searching for the source of the deadly fumes. What they discovered sent a chill through the investigation. There were no carbon monoxide leaks, no malfunctioning gas stoves, no electrical faults. The toxic gas that had filled the house hadn't come from any natural failure. Then came the most unsettling revelation: traces of hydrogen sulfide, a lethal gas with the stench of rotten eggs, nearly undetectable in low concentrations. But where had it come from? It wasn't seeping from the plumbing or drifting up from the drains. Instead, the evidence pointed to something far more sinister. It had been introduced, either from outside the house or, even more disturbingly, from within. Gene Hackman died without a single mark on his body. No struggle, no sign of distress. Betsy Arakawa met the same fate, except she died clutching the phone, as if desperately trying to reach someone. Could their deaths have been carefully staged to resemble an accident? A simple gas leak? But if so, why was there evidence of a gas that didn't belong in the house? Questions piled up like the unseen walls that had long concealed the secrets of their home. Who was the first to notice the deadly fumes? Did Gene slip away first, or did Betsy witness his final moments before succumbing herself? And in those last, desperate seconds, who was she trying to call? If this was murder, it wasn't impulsive. It was cold, calculated, and carried out by someone with the patience to end an aging couple's life in the most chilling way possible. The cruel irony was that Gene Hackman's children, though distant from their father, had always braced themselves for the inevitable. At 94, his passing was only a matter of time. But no one expected it to happen like this. No one thought it would take Betsy, too. The woman over 30 years his junior. The one who should have been arranging his funeral, not sharing his fate. Had they still been living as a couple, or had they quietly grown apart in that vast, lonely house? What were their last words to each other? Were Betsy's hushed phone calls tied to the silent killer in their home? Or had she unknowingly become a pawn in something much darker? As investigators draped white sheets over their bodies, the million-dollar estate fell into silence once more. But this time, the secrets inside were no longer hidden. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's funeral was as quiet as the final years of their lives. No flashing cameras, no intrusive headlines, just a small gathering of family. But beneath the solemn silence, tension simmered. Suspicious glances flickered between those closest to them, unspoken questions hanging in the air. The shock of losing both Gene and Betsy at once was already unsettling. But what came next sent ripples through the room. When Hackman's personal lawyer stepped forward, the air grew heavy. His will had been updated just months before their deaths. And this wasn't just a simple redistribution of wealth. It unveiled a tangled web of unexpected financial moves, cryptic investments, and unsettling transactions. Most damning of all, it exposed long-buried family conflicts, simmering just beneath the surface, now threatening to explode. The lawyer carefully unsealed the envelope, his voice steady but betraying the weight of what he was about to reveal. Gene Hackman's estate, valued at an estimated $80 million, included stocks, real estate, liquid assets, and a network of anonymous investment accounts. But the distribution was a shock. A cold, calculated division that left the room in uneasy silence. Nearly 40% of the fortune went to Betsy Arakawa, the wife more than 30 years his junior. Another 20% was split equally among Hackman's 3 biological children, a sum far less than they had expected. A modest 10% was left to an arts education charity, a move that raised no eyebrows. But it was the remaining 30% that sent a chill through those present. It had been funneled into a mysterious trust, locked away for a decade, with its primary beneficiary remaining undisclosed. The room fell into a heavy silence. Why the secrecy? Who was meant to inherit such a significant portion of Gene Hackman's legacy? And most importantly, what was he trying to hide? Who was the hidden beneficiary? Why had Gene structured his fortune this way? The lawyer clarified a crucial legal twist. Since Gene and Betsy had died almost simultaneously, the exact order of their deaths couldn't be determined. Under New Mexico inheritance law, when no clear order of death is established, assets are treated as if both individuals passed at the same time. This meant Betsy's inheritance wouldn't go to her own family. It would revert back to Gene's estate. Suddenly, the equation shifted. Gene's 3 biological children, who had been left with just 20%, now stood to receive a much larger share. Yet it wasn't that simple. Betsy, the woman they had never fully accepted as family, had become an invisible yet powerful presence in their father's will. At the funeral, they remained silent, their expressions unreadable. But behind closed doors at the lawyer's office, the decades of unresolved tension, unspoken resentments, and buried betrayals erupted like a long dormant volcano, turning Gene Hackman's final legacy into a battleground. Leslie Hackman, Gene's eldest daughter, was the first to break the tense silence. Her voice trembled, though whether from grief or anger was unclear. "Betsy was never our mother. Don't expect us to pretend now," she said bitterly. David, Gene's second son, let out a dry laugh. 40% of the estate to a woman who never gave him children, while his own blood barely gets a quarter? That's rich. The weight of years, awkward family dinners, forced pleasantries, and Betsy's futile attempts to connect with them came rushing back. To Leslie and David, Betsy had always been the woman who walked into their father's life when he was already a legend, already wealthy. To them, she was simply lucky. But for Gene, Betsy had been the only constant when Hollywood's bright lights faded, when the world stopped caring. Had he truly trusted her? Or had he buried quiet suspicions beneath the cold, calculated clauses of his will? The answers, it seemed, were locked away with the secret beneficiary waiting to be unearthed. As investigators combed through Gene Hackman's assets, they uncovered something unexpected: anonymous investment accounts tied to industries far removed from Hollywood. Despite never publicly expressing interest in cryptocurrency, Hackman held significant shares in companies specializing in artificial intelligence and biological data. But the real shock came from a recent financial move. Just weeks before his death, Hackman quietly transferred nearly $2 million into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Why would a retired actor nearing the end of his life suddenly shift such a large sum? Was it a routine investment, or was he trying to hide something he knew time wouldn't allow him to explain? Leslie sat in the car, staring blankly ahead as silent tears traced down her face. The grief wasn't just for her father's death, it was for the truth that had unraveled before her. The man she once idolized, the father who watched movies with her as a child, was now a stranger draped in secrets. Behind the warmth of his presence lay cold calculations, hidden assets, cryptic investments, and financial dealings that felt more like a puzzle than a legacy. "Maybe we never really knew him," Leslie whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The multi-million-dollar inheritance, instead of being a final thread tying the family together, had become a blade, severing what little remained. A fortune left behind, but at a price no amount of money could mend. Gene Hackman was never the conventional Hollywood heartthrob. He lacked the chiseled charm of a leading man, the effortless allure of his era's romantic idols. But what he had was something far rarer, raw, undeniable power. Hackman wasn't just an actor, he was a force, devouring every frame with performances that left an imprint on cinema itself. In the 1980s, standing among Hollywood's elite in the Glorious Seven, he was a king without a throne. From The French Connection to Mississippi Burning and Unforgiven, Hackman didn't simply play roles, he embodied them. He was the rugged, unshaken core of the American identity, the weight of a fading dream etched into every line on his face. In him, audiences saw the grit of a bygone era, the decay of the American dream, the quiet agony of those the world left behind. And then, just like them, he too faded into the shadows. In 2004, Gene Hackman walked away from Hollywood. Not with a grand farewell, not with a final masterpiece to cement his legacy, but with quiet resignation. He cited health reasons, but everyone knew that was just the surface of a deeper truth. Hollywood no longer had a place for him. The industry he helped shape had transformed into a blockbuster assembly line, where young faces, superhero franchises, and CGI spectacles replaced the grit and soul of serious filmmaking. The era of weathered powerhouse actors, the kind who carried entire films on raw talent alone, had faded. Producers who once fought for Hackman's time no longer called. Directors who once revered him now chased the next marketable face. Gene Hackman didn't retire. Hollywood had retired. And in its place, a new machine emerged, one that had no room for legends. After leaving Hollywood, Gene Hackman and Betsy retreated to New Mexico, a place with no red carpets, no star-studded galas, no echoes of the life he once knew. People questioned why a legend of his stature would choose such an isolated existence. The answer was simple and devastating. In Hollywood, no one needed him anymore. In New Mexico, no one knew who he was. What should have been a peaceful retirement in a $1 million desert villa slowly became a gilded cage. Hackman and Betsy lived in near-total seclusion, their ties to the world unraveling year by year. Interview requests dwindled before vanishing entirely. There were no Lifetime Achievement Awards, no grand tributes, no final recognition of a man who had once defined an era of cinema. Hollywood and the media had moved on, as if erasing his name from the history books, leaving Hackman not just forgotten, but invisible. Gene Hackman spent his final years as a ghost king, once a ruler of Hollywood, now cast aside by the very industry he helped define. The most bitter truth was that his greatest, most profound role would never be filmed. There was no script, no director, no dazzling lights. Just four walls, a few aging dogs, and a wife who watched the daily, bearing witness to the slow decline of the man she once adored. Hackman never feared death. He once admitted, "If I die alone one day, I won't be surprised. That's the fate of those who live too long in the limelight." But his exit was more than just the inevitable end of a long life. It was a sentence, a quiet, merciless verdict handed down by an industry that had no patience for aging, no room for those unwilling to bow to its ever-changing demands. Hackman didn't just fade away. He was exiled, punished for daring to live on his own terms. Gene Hackman didn't die from old age or illness. He died because Hollywood had abandoned him long before his heart ever stopped beating. The industry that once celebrated him only did so when he was profitable, when his name filled theater seats and his performances brought in Oscars. But that love was as fleeting as a Monday matinee ticket, cheap, temporary, and easily discarded. When Hackman was no longer a box office draw, no longer the man delivering unforgettable performances or headline-worthy interviews, Hollywood's love vanished. It was never real love to begin with. It was transactional, conditional, an admiration that existed only when he served a purpose. And when he became inconvenient, when he was no longer a name that could be marketed, Hollywood did what it always does. It erased him. Gene Hackman wasn't the only one. He was just one of many icons that once lit up the Hollywood sky, only to be abandoned by that very sky. Peter O'Toole, the legend from Lawrence of Arabia, passed away quietly, unnoticed. Burt Reynolds, from sex symbol to a poor old man. Mickey Rourke, a misfit trying to find his way back into the film industry after years of being considered past his prime. Gene Hackman carried the weight of an entire generation, actors who poured their souls into their craft, who refused to fit the manufactured mold, and who aged with dignity instead of surrendering to Hollywood's obsession with youth. His death wasn't just a personal loss or a farewell for film lovers. It was a damning indictment of an industry that builds legends only to discard them once they no longer serve a purpose. Betsy, in her final words, captured the cruel irony of it all. Gene never forgot who he was. It was Hollywood that forgot. The verdict on Gene Hackman's career had been passed long before his final breath. His death was only the epilogue. Hollywood didn't erase him in an instant. It erased him slowly, piece by piece, through neglect and indifference, replacing its former king with newer, shinier faces. And in the end, all that remained was the silence of a legend the industry pretended never existed. Gene Hackman passed away on a somber afternoon, without headlines, without a grand farewell. The news of his death drifted through the media as quietly as the final years he spent in the vast, lonely desert of New Mexico, a place where his name had long faded from Hollywood's memory. There was no national tribute, no mourning crowds leaving flowers at his gate, no candle-lit vigils, just a handful of brief news reports, a few dry career summaries, and then nothing. Once a cinematic titan, Hackman had become just another name lost in time, buried beneath legal documents, forgotten tax returns, and the cold calculations of his final will. But behind the paperwork, behind the silence, there were fragments, whispers of unfinished stories, secrets still waiting to be uncovered. Hackman's will didn't just divide his multi-million-dollar estate. It opened a Pandora's box of unanswered questions. A hidden portion of his wealth, entangled in offshore investments and foreign transactions, created a financial labyrinth so complex that even his own lawyer struggled to piece it together. Why would a man who once condemned tax loopholes quietly funnel assets through overseas accounts? In the years leading up to his death, why did he repeatedly revise his will, severing ties with certain relatives, adding unfamiliar names, and allocating unexplained sums to an anonymous NGO? Gene Hackman didn't just leave behind a fortune, he left behind a puzzle, and with each uncovered detail, the mystery only deepened. Gene Hackman's death was initially attributed to old age and complications from chronic heart disease. But whispers of something more sinister began circulating through local New Mexico newspapers. A chilling theory that toxic gas had seeped into his secluded home. A small but detectable amount of carbon monoxide was found within the estate. Investigators speculated that the home's aging ventilation system, though functional, may have slowly poisoned him over time, causing fatigue-induced hallucinations and accelerating his decline. What made this even more unsettling was the fact that the system had been inspected just months before Hackman's death. At the time, there were no leaks, no warning signs. Had this been a tragic accident? Or had someone deliberately turned his multi-million-dollar retreat into a death trap? Could his shadowy financial dealings have played a role in his mysterious end? Local authorities launched an investigation, but as Hollywood moved on, so did the headlines. The case, much like the man himself, slipped into silence. Leslie cried in front of the media, not only because she had lost her father, but also due to the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She thought that after years of estrangement, Hackman and she had finally reconciled, but the cold, ruthless, and calculated final will told a different story. When a legend falls, it isn't just tears that fall, but also blood, betrayal, and wounds that never heal. If Hollywood were a house, Gene Hackman was the one who built every brick. But when he passed away, Hollywood didn't look back. No official memorial, no special film festivals to honor him. In fact, some of the younger people in the industry began asking each other, "Who is Gene Hackman?" And so Hollywood, where glory and oblivion are separated by just a breath, shifted their attention to younger, more marketable stars, leaving Hackman's legacy behind. Gene Hackman, once revered as Hollywood's unthroned king, died a forgotten man on the very soil where he had built his legacy. The industry that once praised him had long since moved on, and his death was nothing more than a fleeting headline buried beneath a flood of trivial celebrity gossip. The stories were never told. The tapes were never made. His family remained silent. The public barely noticed. And as time passed, Hackman's name faded, his secret slipping into the grave with him, at least for now. Because in Hollywood, nothing stays buried forever. All it takes is someone with enough ambition or enough ruthlessness to dig them back up. One day, those hidden recordings may surface, and when they do, the world will see that Gene Hackman's death wasn't just a consequence of age or illness, but the weight of the dark secrets that followed him to the very end. But that day has yet to come. For now, the curtain has closed, and Gene Hackman, the forgotten king, lingers only as a ghost in Hollywood's shadow. He is gone, taking his decaying truths to the grave. What he left behind was not a legacy, but a curse. One that demands payment in whispers, suspicion, and wounds that time will never heal. Will the truth about Gene Hackman ever come to light, or will it remain one of Hollywood's greatest unsolved mysteries? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss more thrilling content. See you in the next one. Hello, everyone. An empire worth millions of dollars, a missing will, and a family torn apart by greed. Gene Hackman's children, who were supposed to stand by each other, are now embroiled in a ruthless battle. Who truly deserves the inheritance? Who is hiding something? Did someone in the family push him to this end? Money can buy everything, including silence and perhaps even death. Are you ready to follow us as we uncover Gene Hackman's will? If you want to know, leave a comment with the number 1 to follow the video. Hollywood has produced countless stars, but there is only one Gene Hackman. For over 50 years, he was not only a talented actor, but also a living icon of American cinema, a strong man who took on complex roles with a sharp gaze and commanding voice. From The French Connection to Unforgiven, Gene Hackman didn't just act. He made everyone believe in every character he portrayed. But like any legend, Hackman chose a mysterious exit, leaving behind a vast fortune and a series of unanswered questions. Unlike many other stars, Hackman didn't cling to the spotlight as he aged. In 2004, he left Hollywood without any farewells, saying in a rare interview, "Acting is no longer my life." While his contemporaries continued to appear on screen, Hackman sought a peaceful retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he lived with his second wife, Betsy Arakawa, a former pianist whom Hackman deeply loved. They lived a simple life, away from the limelight, spending time writing books, cycling along country roads, and enjoying their final years. No one knows exactly what Hackman thought of his glorious past. He didn't return to accept honorary awards or participate in formal gatherings. A legend quietly stepped off the stage, yet his presence still looms large over Hollywood. Hackman wasn't just an actor, he was also a writer. After leaving the film industry, he released several novels, mostly in the genres of crime and historical fiction. While these books didn't receive the same admiration as his acting career, they served as a testament to his sharp intellect. However, it's important to note that despite stepping away from the glamorous world of Hollywood, Hackman never truly escaped the spotlight. Both Hackman and Betsy Arakawa appeared to be in good health despite their advanced age. He continued cycling regularly, enjoying the fresh air. So when news of their death spread, the world was shocked. What was particularly puzzling was that they passed away under mysterious circumstances, just a short time apart. There were no signs of foul play, no last words, and no one knew exactly what had happened during their final days. Medical investigation reports revealed that Hackman had severe Alzheimer's disease, which completely contradicted what he had publicly disclosed. Additionally, the autopsy showed that Hackman had a serious history of heart disease, including a previous heart attack, which he had kept secret from everyone. If his health was that deteriorated, why did his family remain unaware? As for Betsy Arakawa, she was said to have died from a rare illness transmitted by rodents, a strange coincidence that seemed almost too unbelievable. Hollywood is no stranger to mysterious death stories. But could this be one of them? The public and media quickly started generating various theories. Some suggested it was just a sad irony, but many others began to question whether Hackman and his wife knew something that someone else wanted to keep hidden. In addition to the mysteries surrounding the deaths of Hackman and Arakawa, another issue quickly captured the public's attention. Who would inherit his massive fortune? According to several sources, Hackman had an estimated net worth of around $80 million, including real estate, investments, and profits from his films. Notably, Hackman's relationship with his children in his later years was not very good. He had little contact with some family members, raising questions about whether they were included in his will. According to publicly available legal documents, Hackman did not leave behind a detailed will, or if he did, its contents have not yet been disclosed. This led to a quiet but intense dispute within the family. A family member who wished to remain anonymous revealed to the press, "No one really knows what Hackman left behind. But it's clear that not everyone is happy with how the estate is being divided. Hackman's adult children from his first marriage believe they are entitled to a large portion of their father's wealth, But Betsy Arakawa, Hackman's second wife, who cared for him for many years, may have left behind a separate will or even had control over much of the estate before her death. The dispute isn't just about money, it also involves Hackman's art collection, film rights, and personal memorabilia. Some of his personal letters, movie scripts, and even vintage cars are said to be worth millions of dollars. The conflict isn't limited to the family either. Several of Hackman's former collaborators in the film industry have also begun to voice their claims, asserting that they have rights to some of his assets. Several lawsuits have already been filed, and lawyers are closely monitoring every development in this ongoing dispute. No matter how long the inheritance battle drags on, one thing remains undeniable. Gene Hackman was a legend. He left behind not just iconic films, but also a legacy that will never fade. But is this the end of his story, or are there still hidden secrets in Hackman's life? A legend may depart, but the questions about him will forever remain. Gene Hackman not only left a deep impression through his outstanding performances, but also amassed a massive fortune, estimated at around $80 million. However, few know that beneath his simple appearance and quiet life, Hackman had accumulated and managed his wealth in a sophisticated and mysterious way. One of Hackman's most notable assets is his $3.8 million mansion in Santa Fe, New Mexico, built in the traditional Pueblo architectural style. This home reflects a harmonious blend of nature and artistry. Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, moved here in the 1980s, seeking a peaceful place far from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood. The over 8,000-square-foot mansion includes multiple bedrooms, a spacious living room, and an office where Hackman frequently wrote books after his retirement. The surrounding grounds are covered with the distinctive desert landscape of New Mexico, offering a sense of tranquility and serenity. In an interview, Hackman once shared that he greatly appreciated the simplicity and natural beauty of the land, where he could escape the stress of Hollywood. In addition to the Santa Fe mansion, Hackman also owned several other valuable real estate properties. He had previously owned a home in Montecito, California, a renowned area known for its wealthy residents and breathtaking views. This house was sold in 2012 for approximately $25 million, which significantly contributed to his fortune. Additionally, Hackman had investments in various other fields. Gene Hackman, the Hollywood legend with a career spanning over 6 decades, left behind an estate valued at approximately $80 million after his death alongside his wife, Betsy Arakawa. The sudden passing of both not only saddened fans, but also raised an important question. Who will inherit Hackman's massive fortune? If Hackman had left behind a clear will, things might have been simpler, but with initial reports suggesting no specific legal documents were made public, family disputes now seem inevitable. The long simmering tensions within the Hackman family may now escalate into a prolonged legal battle. Gene Hackman had 3 children from his first marriage to Faye Maltz: Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie. Although he kept his private life under wraps, those close to him revealed that his relationship with his children in his later years was far from harmonious. As an A-list star with a busy schedule, Hackman rarely spent time with his children when they were young. He was always strict and seldom expressed affection, which led his children to feel neglected and lacking the attention of their famous father. Christopher, the eldest son, shared in a rare interview, Growing up with a legendary father was both a privilege and a challenge. We admired him, but we also longed for his presence. Elizabeth and Leslie felt similarly. Although they loved their father, they didn't have many fond memories with him. All three siblings felt that their relationship with their father was one-sided, respectful but not truly close. The emotional wounds from the past, never fully healed, may now become a source of tension, potentially sparking a bitter legal battle over his estate. Normally, for wealthy and famous individuals like Gene Hackman, creating a will or trust to manage their assets after death is crucial. If Hackman had a specific will, it would clearly outline who would receive what and under what conditions. However, the issue is that there is no official information regarding whether he left behind a will. This leaves his entire estate in a situation of intestacy, meaning that the assets will be divided according to inheritance laws. If Hackman did not leave a will according to the law, his assets would be divided as follows. His biological children would have the right to inherit his estate, while his wife, Betsy Arakawa, if still alive, would be entitled to a significant portion of the estate under inheritance laws. However, since Betsy passed away at the same time as Hackman, this complicates the issue. If Betsy had a separate will, her estate could be distributed according to her wishes, potentially causing further disputes between Hackman's family and Betsy's family. Currently, the family's lawyers are reviewing the asset records and related documents to determine inheritance rights. However, one thing is clear. There will be no simple solution. Betsy Arakawa was Hackman's second wife, and they had been together for over 30 years, with their marriage considered to be a happy one. However, the relationship between Betsy and Hackman's children was not smooth. A close source revealed that Betsy had tried to mend the relationship between Gene and his children, but it was still not enough. There has always been underlying tension within the family. Betsy was an intelligent woman, skilled in financial management, and had a significant influence on Hackman. If she were still alive, she would likely be the one Hackman trusted to manage most of his assets. However, the sudden deaths of both Hackman and Betsy have complicated matters more than ever. Betsy's family could also claim a portion of the estate if she did not leave a will of her own, creating a complex situation where Hackman's family may have to face off against Betsy's family in a battle over inheritance rights. In addition to family members, some third parties could also claim a share of Hackman's estate. Among them are former business partners. Some people who worked with Hackman in the film industry may assert that they have a right to assets from unfinished joint projects. Charitable organizations that Hackman contributed to throughout his life could also become part of the dispute if he left a will designating them as beneficiaries. Close friends and associates of Hackman might provide evidence that he intended to share part of his fortune with them. Claims from third parties could complicate the dispute further and prolong the process of distributing his estate. This inheritance battle is not just a financial issue, but also deeply damaging to the family's emotional well-being. If Hackman's children cannot reach an agreement, they may end up suing each other in a prolonged legal battle. The relationship between Hackman's family and Betsy's family could be severely fractured if the two sides cannot agree on how to divide the estate. Hackman's reputation could also be affected, as celebrity inheritance disputes often become tabloid fodder. A close family friend shared, "It's heartbreaking to see a family torn apart over material possessions." The greatest legacy Gene Hackman left behind is not just his material wealth, but the artistic and spiritual values he contributed to the world of cinema. However, his inheritance battle serves as a reminder of the importance of careful financial planning. Without a proper resolution, Hackman's family could face a long, tense, and contentious legal battle. Whether the involved parties can find common ground and honor Hackman's legacy, or whether they will allow the conflicts to further divide the family remains a significant question. With the passing of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa just 7 days apart, their inheritance issue is far from a straightforward division of assets. The inheritance laws in New Mexico, where Hackman and Arakawa lived, have strict regulations regarding the order of inheritance when there is no clear will. The legal complexities include the fact that Hackman passed away after his wife, which could change the entire distribution of assets under inheritance laws. How will New Mexico's inheritance laws handle the situation when neither of them is alive to inherit each other's assets? Hackman may have had Alzheimer's in his later years. Could this affect the legality of his will? If a new will was made recently, could it be challenged on the grounds of its validity? New Mexico has clear regulations regarding inheritance when there is no will, under the laws of intestate succession. If Hackman did not leave a will, or if his will is challenged, state law will determine how the assets are divided. According to inheritance laws in New Mexico, if someone passes away without a will and has a spouse and children, the spouse will receive all joint property and 1/4 of the deceased's separate property. The children will share the remaining separate property equally. If there is no surviving spouse, the entire estate will be divided equally among the children. If there is no spouse and no children, the assets will go to the deceased's parents, if they are alive, and if the parents have passed, the estate will be divided among the deceased's siblings. Since Betsy Arakawa passed away 7 days before Hackman, she will no longer have the right to inherit his assets. Hackman's entire estate will be transferred to his children, Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie. If Betsy had a separate will, her assets would be distributed according to her will. However, if neither of them left a will, Betsy's estate could be subject to intestate succession, and her assets would be divided according to New Mexico's inheritance laws. New Mexico has a survivorship period rule, which requires a person to live for at least 120 hours, 5 days, after the death of another in order to inherit their assets. Since Hackman survived Betsy by 7 days, he still has the right to inherit her estate under the law. However, because Hackman passed away shortly afterward, his estate could not be managed by him and will be divided according to the law. This creates a complex situation where both Hackman and Betsy's estates will have to be distributed almost simultaneously. If Hackman did not have a will, his assets will be divided among his children. However, if Betsy had a separate will, her heirs may claim their share, leading to a potential legal battle between the Hackman and Arakawa families. An important factor that could impact the inheritance case is Hackman's health in his final years. Some close sources suggest that Hackman may have experienced cognitive decline due to aging, with possible signs of Alzheimer's disease. If Hackman did indeed suffer from Alzheimer's or severe memory loss, any will created during this period could be challenged in terms of its legality. A party might argue that Hackman lacked the legal capacity to create a valid will and request the court to review the validity of that will. If the will is found to be invalid, Hackman's estate would be distributed according to New Mexico's intestate succession laws, with his children receiving the entire estate. There are rumors that Hackman updated his will shortly before his death. If this is true, the biggest question is whether the new will is legally valid. Reasons a new will could be challenged include whether Hackman was influenced by others when creating the will. If there is evidence that he was coerced or manipulated by a close individual, the will could be declared invalid. Another factor to consider is whether the will was created according to legal requirements. New Mexico requires that a will must be signed by the testator and two witnesses who have no personal interest in the will. Could Betsy Arakawa have had influence over the will if it favored her family more than Hackman's children? Hackman's children may potentially file a lawsuit to claim their inheritance rights. With all these complex legal factors, the division of Hackman's estate will likely be far from straightforward. If Hackman did not leave a will, his estate would be divided among his children. If there is a new will, it will need to be thoroughly examined and could lead to legal disputes. If Betsy's family intervenes, the case could turn into a prolonged legal battle. Will the law favor one side? Possibly. But this inheritance dispute will undoubtedly become a fierce battle between the parties involved. The consecutive deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa within 7 days have raised many important questions. Although the cause of death is officially recorded as natural, some strange details have prevented the police from closing the case. Why are investigators keeping the case open? Is there something that hasn't been revealed? And specifically, why has the death of Xena, the couple's loyal dog, become an important part of the investigation? From the outside, Hackman and Arakawa's life seemed very peaceful. The couple lived quietly in their later years on a tranquil ranch in New Mexico, but it was precisely this tranquility that raised suspicions when they both passed away suddenly, just 7 days apart. There are still unclear details. Hackman had no significant history of serious illness, so why did he die so quickly after the death of his wife? Are there signs that suggest the couple might have been poisoned or influenced by external factors? Betsy Arakawa passed away first, but is there something about her death that could be related to Hackman's? One noteworthy point is that, according to some inside sources, investigators have gathered some unpublicized evidence, including toxicology samples from both bodies. The results of these tests have not yet been released. Why haven't the police closed the case? Normally, if an elderly person passes away from natural causes, the police would quickly close the case. However, the case of Hackman and Arakawa is completely different. The FBI and local law enforcement are continuing the investigation for several suspicious reasons, with signs that prevent them from closing the case too quickly. Did Hackman make any important changes in his final days? According to some sources, Hackman made an unusual phone call the night before he passed away. The content of this call has not been disclosed, but it could be an important clue leading to the decision to expand the police investigation. Are there any irregularities in the financial records? Bank documents show that several large transactions occurred just before both of their deaths. Who made these transactions? Could Hackman have been defrauded or coerced into signing important documents? Another notable detail is the strange theft that took place just before their deaths. A few weeks before Betsy passed away, a burglary occurred at their farm. Although nothing obvious was stolen, it seems like someone had rifled through their personal documents. Could this theft be related to their deaths? One of the crucial clues in this case is the mobile phones of Hackman and Betsy. The police have reviewed the call history, text messages, and GPS data in search of suspicious signs. The mysterious call before Hackman's death. Just one day before passing away, Hackman made a call that lasted nearly 20 minutes to an unknown phone number. The recipient of this call has not been identified, but according to the recorded data, Hackman appeared anxious and fearful. What caused him to be so worried? Did he uncover something before his death? Betsy's unsent message. In Betsy's phone, the police discovered an unsent message. The content of the message seemed to indicate that she was about to share an important secret with someone, but she passed away before she could send it. Who was the recipient of this message, and what secret was Betsy about to reveal? The mysterious death of Xena, their dog. There is a lesser-known but extremely important detail. Xena, their dog, also died mysteriously shortly after Betsy passed away. What's noteworthy is that Xena was a healthy dog, with no serious illness. A veterinary examination revealed signs of poisoning, but the exact method of poisoning remains unclear. If someone poisoned Xena, could this be a sign of a sophisticated assassination attempt targeted at Hackman and Betsy? Why is this a crucial clue? If someone had poisoned Xena, it's likely they tested the poisoning method before targeting Hackman and Betsy. This raises a big question. Could this not have been a natural death, but rather a planned murder? Although authorities have not officially released information, it is clear that there are many unusual factors surrounding the deaths of Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. Unanswered questions include: were they poisoned? Who did Hackman call before he passed away? What was Betsy planning to reveal in the unsent message? Why was Xena poisoned right after Betsy's death? With all of these elements, the police cannot rush to close the case. While on the surface this may appear to be a natural death of an elderly couple, many clues suggest there could be a much more complex story behind it. After the consecutive deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, a major question arises. Who will be the rightful heir to the vast fortune that Hackman left behind? Inheritance disputes are often complicated, and this case is no exception. With an estimated estate worth between $80 to $100 million, it's certain that many individuals or organizations will want to claim their share. Will Gene Hackman's legacy endure and withstand the test of time, or will it become entangled in an endless legal battle? If Hackman has a valid will, the will specify his legal heirs. One possibility is that Betsy Arakawa could be the primary heir. However, since she passed away before the estate was transferred, the question arises as to whether Hackman updated his will after her death. If the will was not updated, the estate will be distributed according to New Mexico's inheritance laws, leading to the scenarios outlined below. If Hackman did not leave a clear will, or if his will is declared invalid, the estate will be divided according to New Mexico's inheritance laws. In this case, because Betsy Arakawa passed away first, her estate will not automatically be transferred to her. Hackman's children will be the primary heirs. Gene Hackman's estate is large enough to spark disputes. While the court will make the final decision, there will likely be multiple legal battles before the estate is actually divided. If there is a clear will, the process could be simpler. Otherwise, it could turn into a complex lawsuit that lasts for years. Finally, the question is not only about who will inherit the estate, but whether Hackman's legacy will be protected or caught up in an endless cycle of litigation. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more interesting stories. See you in the next videos! In the glamorous world of Hollywood, Gene Hackman was once a legend. With iconic roles in films like The French Connection and Unforgiven, he wasn't just an actor, but a man who embodied a golden age of cinema. However, after 40 years in the spotlight, Hackman abruptly retired, stepping away from the limelight without a farewell, without a round of applause. And from that moment, the story of his silence, his betrayals, and the untold secrets began. In this video, we will explore the secrets behind Gene Hackman's sudden death, the financial troubles he left behind, and why a legend was forgotten by both Hollywood and even his own family. Was his death due to old age, or is the truth behind it even more terrifying? If you find this content interesting, leave a 1 in the comments, and if not, leave a 0. Don't miss out on more intriguing content. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Gene Hackman's daughter now quietly utters spine-chilling words, as if peeling back the decaying layers of a legend shattered in the glory that he himself had built. No dramatic cries, no deep mourning. Leslie Hackman's strange, confused, and uneasy reaction shattered her already fractured family, sending chills through the public and turning news-hungry reporters into ravenous vultures. Gene Hackman passed away in a cold house filled with the stench of toxic gas. But the biggest surprise wasn't his death. It was the silence that had lasted for 2 decades, finally broken when Leslie spoke out. The daughter who once lived behind closed doors is now a living witness. Instead of mourning with each word she speaks, like a knife peeling back a dirty truth no one dared to touch, Leslie Hackman has turned Gene Hackman's legacy into a nightmare, transforming it into a corpse. Behind her cold eyes and strange words, Leslie Hackman is hiding a dark secret. Gene Hackman, who once ruled the Hollywood silver screen with iconic roles in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Bonnie and Clyde, and Superman, was a regular on the covers of the world's most prestigious magazines. He strolled down red carpets, received roaring applause, and basked in flashing lights, attending lavish parties that lasted until dawn. But after 2004, Hackman suddenly disappeared without a formal retirement announcement, never appearing at press conferences or award ceremonies. It was as if Hackman vanished into thin air, his name only mentioned in anniversary articles or lists of Hollywood legends. He then retreated further into silence, allowing the passage of time to pull the legend of his own name away from the spotlight of Los Angeles. Hackman and his 31-year younger wife, Betsy Arakawa, chose Santa Fe, New Mexico as their sanctuary, a $3.8 million home nestled among the majestic mountains. No lavish parties, no paparazzi lurking, just the two of them, 3 dogs, and afternoons passing quietly. Neighbors in the Santa Fe area reported that they rarely saw Hackman leave his home in the mornings. People often spotted him holding a cup of coffee, sitting on the porch, gazing out toward the distant mountains. The once imposing figure in a sheriff's uniform was now just a frail old man with deep-set eyes filled with secrets yet to be revealed. His life seemed like an old film playing in slow motion, with each scene, each fragmented memory replaying every time he closed his eyes. Betsy Arakawa, the woman whom Hackman's family had initially doubted when they first married, ended up being the one who stayed by his side the longest. She cared for Hackman with the patience of an experienced nurse, attending to each pill, each meal. But was that love truly pure? Or was Betsy like their house in Santa Fe, a safe fortress, yet also a cage that trapped Hackman's inescapable loneliness? Close friends who visited Hackman recall that he seemed to have become a completely different person after his retreat from Hollywood. He spoke little, avoided discussing his career, and never revisited his own films. New scripts sent his way were promptly rejected by Betsy. In a recent interview, Hackman confessed, "I haven't watched my films in years. They're part of the past. They're not mine anymore." For 20 years, from 2004 to 2024, Hackman lived like a ghost. While his body remained, there were no grand events, no public appearances. The only time he was spotted was in 2023, when paparazzi captured a moment of Hackman and Betsy visiting a modest seafood restaurant. He appeared noticeably thinner, clinging to his wife's arm with each step. Yet that appearance, the same one that had once struck fear in Hollywood during the French Connection, still radiated a certain brilliance. Neighbors recount that Hackman's house was often closed off, but on some late nights, they would occasionally hear small arguments. No one knew the content of these exchanges, but it seemed that Betsy always ended the conversations. No one dared linger near the house for too long, as there was an eerie energy that emanated from it, an energy that was both dark and unsettling. For 21 years, there were no public images of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. The absolute silence acted as a velvet curtain, closing a chapter of legendary stardom while fueling countless conspiracy theories. Some believed Hackman suffered from depression after the spotlight faded, while others suspected that Betsy isolated him from the outside world to control his fortune. Whatever the reason, Hackman chose to live in silence, as if he wanted to erase his name from Hollywood's history. Everyone in Hollywood understood that disappearing didn't mean being forgotten, but for Hackman, it was a choice. He refused all interviews, even turning down honorary invitations like the Lifetime Achievement Oscar. People couldn't understand why someone who had once poured everything into his craft would turn his back on the very thing that had defined him. Hackman's silence was the first warning that no one who had lived in the bright spotlight for 40 years could disappear so easily. What did that silence hide? A family secret? A shocking will? Or a personal pain that Hackman had never shared with anyone? Not even his first wife, Faye Maltz, or his 3 biological children. When the call from the Santa Fe police came late at night, reporting 2 bodies found in separate rooms and a mysteriously dead dog, all the suspicions that had been suppressed for 21 years suddenly erupted. Gene Hackman, the legend who once dominated the silver screen, was now just a name in a coroner's report. The silence before the storm turned out to be just the opening chapter of a much darker, longer, and more painful story. A chapter that his own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, could not hold back tears when she held the will in her hands. The dirt roads leading to the wealthy neighborhood on the outskirts of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Gene Hackman and his wife lived in seclusion, always carried a strange, lonely atmosphere. The sun in this high desert didn't shine like in California, nor was it as cool as in the eastern U.S. Instead, it cast an old, tired light over everything, as if the sky itself were patiently waiting for something to fall apart. Gene Hackman's million-dollar home sat quietly atop a hill, overlooking the rolling mountains, holding secrets that no one dared to touch. The neighbors surrounding the Hackman residence rarely saw the couple outside. They didn't attend weekend wine parties, never went to church, nor visited the bustling farmers' markets. Both Gene and Betsy, when they did appear, were nothing more than faint shadows, passing by and disappearing behind the high iron gate. It is said that around 6 a.m., when the sun still lingered behind the mountains, Betsy would quietly take the old dog out of the house. She moved slowly, her eyes darting around as if she feared someone might be watching. The heavy steps of the dog seemed to echo the tension that enveloped the house. Less than 15 minutes later, Betsy would return with the dog, gently closing the gate, as if afraid that the sound might wake the sleeping spirits within the walls of Gene Hackman's home. Since his heart began to betray him, Gene Hackman rarely left his house. The only person who stepped through the door besides the Hackman family was a middle-aged woman, the delivery woman, with a face marked by sorrow. She would always mumble a few words as she left. Once, she whispered to a neighbor next door, "They're hiding something. There's something big that no one knows." Betsy Arakawa had no close relationships with anyone other than Gene Hackman, as she was an intensely private person. But an elderly neighbor, living just behind Hackman's fence, confirmed that Betsy often made phone calls in the backyard. Her voice was so soft that outsiders couldn't catch the content, but occasionally, a few words slipped through the trees. "He's getting worse. No, we can't let anyone know. This house isn't safe." These calls, according to the neighbor, always ended with a quiet sigh of relief, as though Betsy were carrying the weight of the entire sky on her shoulders. Who was on the other end of the line, Betsy's relatives or someone who held the secrets of the Hackman family? No one knew. But over time, the frequency of these calls increased, and the lines of worry on Betsy's face deepened after each conversation. Gene Hackman's home, once praised by the media as an architectural masterpiece amidst the wilderness, was, to those who had entered, a place colder than any they had ever known. It wasn't the cold of the climate or the architecture. It was the coldness in the air, a nameless sorrow that hung heavy. The walls were adorned with countless frames, but strangely there were no pictures of Gene Hackman's 3 biological children. Instead, only pictures of Betsy and Hackman from their travels together. Hackman's children, once running around the backyard of his Los Angeles home, had completely vanished from his life. Gene Hackman never publicly disclosed his health condition, but according to neighbors, many believed Hackman had been battling numerous ailments, from heart disease to arthritis and spinal degeneration. However, the most terrifying affliction wasn't the medical diagnosis, it was the invisible obsession that haunted the aging legends of Hollywood. From Marlon Brando and Katharine Hepburn to Greta Garbo, all the greatest icons of the Golden Age shared one tragic fate: being forgotten while still alive. For Hackman, once a box office titan who ensured his name was synonymous with success for 3 decades, seeing himself slowly fade into obscurity, remembered only as an old legacy, was perhaps the disease that most ravaged his soul. Betsy once confided to a neighbor during a rare conversation. Gene doesn't watch his old films. He says they belong to a different life. That was how Hackman severed the last thread connecting him to Hollywood, to his glorious past. But the truth was, every night as the house fell into silence, Betsy would see him standing by the bedroom window, gazing at the distant mountains, whispering something to himself. Those whispers behind the door weren't the wind or hallucinations. They were unfinished conversations between Gene Hackman and his former self, the man who once stood in the dazzling spotlight, believing that the glory would last forever. But when the door closed and the Hollywood lights dimmed, all that remained was Gene Hackman, an old man alone and lost in his $1,000,000 home. And beyond that door, beyond the cold iron fence, the world kept turning. No one remembering Gene Hackman except for the whispers, waiting to become reality. The $1,000,000 house in the New Mexico hills, which once held whispered secrets and mysterious midnight calls, is now a cold, deathly crime scene. Red and blue lights flashing from police cars reflect off the adobe walls, casting an eerie glow on the night sky. Local residents quietly stand behind wooden fences, trying to imagine what could be happening inside the home that had been silent for years. The police break down the door, not because they received a distress call or heard screams, but because the unusual silence had drawn them there. The drug dealer, a middle-aged woman with a tired face, was the first to smell something, an indescribable odor. Not quite death, not quite mold, but a strange combination of chemicals and decaying flesh. When the door opened, what greeted the investigators was not a chaotic murder scene, but an absolute silence. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, 2 decomposed bodies, lay in separate rooms, each positioned differently, but sharing the same fate. Gene Hackman was lying on his back on the bed, the blanket pulled up to his chest as if he had simply fallen asleep after a long, tiring day. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open, but there were no signs of struggle or pain, no bruises, no marks of any kind, just the absolute silence of a body that had ceased to breathe. Betsy Arakawa, just a few steps away in the room, was slumped beside the bed, her arm still gripping the landline phone, one of the few items left from when they moved in. The phone showed no signs of an incoming call. No one knew if Betsy had dialed anyone, but her eyes were wide open, pupils clouded, staring at the window where the last light of the evening still lingered. Had she tried to call someone? Surely she must have been the first to notice something was wrong in the house. The 3 dogs lived with Gene and Betsy when the police arrived. 2 of them were still alive, huddled beside their owners' bodies, their eyes red from fear and exhaustion. But the oldest dog, the one Betsy would take for walks every morning, was dead in the hallway between the 2 bedrooms. There was no sign of external force, no blood, no violence. The dog seemed to have died as if it were simply asleep. Why did 2 survive while 1 did not? Was the gas in the house not potent enough to kill them all, or was there something else that happened before the gas spread? Was it just a random occurrence, or did someone make a deliberate decision to end only one 4-legged life? The forensic team immediately checked the heating system, gas pipes, and appliances in the house. The results sent a chill down everyone's spine. No sign of carbon monoxide leaks, no gas stoves turned on, no electrical short circuits. The toxic gas that spread throughout the house didn't seem to originate from within the house itself. The quick analysis left the entire investigation team silent. There was hydrogen sulfide in the air, a deadly gas with the smell of rotten eggs, but very difficult to detect in low concentrations. The source was unclear. It didn't come from the plumbing or the drains, and it appeared to have been introduced into the house from an external source, or worse, from inside the house itself. Gene Hackman died without a single wound, with no signs of a struggle. Betsy Arakawa was the same, except for the fact that she died while trying to contact someone. Could their deaths have been staged to look like an accident? A natural gas leak? But if that's the case, why was there evidence of a type of gas that didn't belong in the house? Questions began to pile up, layer after layer, like the illusory walls surrounding the already secretive house. Did Gene die before or after Betsy? Who was the first to notice the toxic gas? Who did Betsy try to call in her final moments? And if this was a murder, who was patient and cold enough to kill an elderly couple in such a brutal manner? The irony is that all three of Gene Hackman's children, despite not being as close to their father as before, had always mentally prepared for the day their 94-year-old father would pass away. But no one expected that day to come in this way. Taking Gene's wife, who was over 30 years younger, and who should have been the one arranging his funeral. No one knew if they were living together or separated. No one knew what Gene and Betsy had said to each other in their last moments. Were Betsy's secretive calls related to an invisible gas, or was she also a victim of a long-planned conspiracy? As the white cloth was laid over the two bodies, the million-dollar house fell silent once again. But this time, the secrets were no longer kept. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's funeral was quiet, much like the final years of their lives. There were no paparazzi, no media, just their closest family. But beneath the surface of that silence was an undercurrent of unanswered questions and suspicious glances weaving through those considered family. No one was prepared for the shock of losing both Gene and Betsy at the same time, but that shock paled in comparison to the earthquake that erupted when Gene's personal lawyer announced that his will had been updated just a few months before they passed. A will that not only redistributed millions of dollars, but also revealed financial secrets, strange investment decisions, shady dealings, and most importantly, simmering conflicts among the Hackman family members. The lawyer carefully unsealed the envelope, his voice steady but trying to maintain control as he read through each clause. The estimated estate was valued at $80 million, encompassing stocks, real estate, cash, and several anonymous investment accounts. However, the distribution was a cold slap in the face. A large portion, nearly 40%, was left to Betsy Arakawa, Gene's wife, who was 30 years his junior. 20% was divided equally among Gene's 3 biological children from his first marriage. 10% was allocated to an arts education charity, something no one found surprising. The remaining 30% was transferred into a secret trust, with the condition that it wouldn't be distributed for 10 years after Gene's death, and the identity of the primary beneficiary was not to be revealed immediately. Who is the secret beneficiary? Why did Gene choose to distribute his wealth in such a way? The lawyer further explained that because Gene and Betsy died almost simultaneously, no one could determine the order of death. According to New Mexico inheritance law, when the order of death cannot be proven, assets are treated as if both individuals died at the same time. This meant that Betsy's portion of the inheritance would not be passed directly to her family, but would revert to Gene's estate. Gene's 3 biological children, who had initially received only 20%, now found themselves facing the potential redistribution of Betsy's assets. Assets from someone they had never truly considered their mother. Betsy became an invisible figure in her husband's will. At the funeral, they remained silent, but once the lawyer's office door closed, the long-suppressed family conflicts that had been simmering for decades exploded like a ticking time bomb. Leslie Hackman, Gene's eldest daughter, was the first to speak, her voice trembling, though it was unclear whether it was from sorrow or anger. "Betsy was never our mother. Don't make us play along with this charade," she said bitterly. David, the second son, scoffed. 40% of the estate left to a woman who never gave him children, while the 3 biological children barely get a quarter of it. From awkward family dinners to Betsy's attempts to bond with Gene's children, only to be met with indifference, all the memories came flooding back for Leslie and David. Betsy had always been the lucky woman to step into Gene's life when he was already wealthy and famous. But for Gene, Betsy had been the only one by his side when the Hollywood limelight faded. Did Gene trust Betsy completely? Or had he hidden his suspicions about his own death beneath that cold will? During the asset inventory process, a series of anonymous investment accounts were revealed. Gene Hackman, a man who had never publicly shown interest in cryptocurrency, owned a large number of shares in companies involved in artificial intelligence and biological data. In fact, just weeks before his death, Gene transferred a large sum, nearly $2 million, into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Why would a seasoned actor nearing the end of his life get involved in such mysterious financial transactions? After leaving the lawyer's office, Leslie sat silently in the car, tears streaming down her face. Not only because she had lost her father, but also because of the truth about his life. The father she had once idolized was now brutally exposed before her. He wasn't just a loving father, but also a man of calculations, with financial secrets, shady dealings, and hidden assets. All of this painted a completely different picture of Gene Hackman than the man who used to watch movies with his daughter every night. "Perhaps we never truly understood him," Leslie muttered. The multi-million-dollar inheritance, instead of being a bridge connecting the family, turned out to be a sharp knife that severed the fragile family ties. A vast fortune, but at the cost of a broken family. Gene Hackman was once a box office guarantee. He didn't possess the handsome charm of a leading man, nor was he a romantic figure oozing with sexual appeal like the masculine icons of his era. Hackman was the type of actor that Hollywood's golden age longed for. Powerful, gritty performances, as if he was swallowing each frame into his very being. He stood there, in the midst of the 80s in the glorious 7, like a king without a throne. From The French Connection to Mississippi Burning and Unforgiven, Hackman didn't just act. He became the embodiment of the classic, yet unyielding American man. In Gene Hackman, people saw the wrinkles of an era, the decay of the American dream, and the pain of those forgotten by the world. And then, he himself became one of them. In 2004, Gene Hackman announced his retirement quietly, without fanfare, and without a final blockbuster film to wave goodbye to Hollywood. He disappeared, stepping away from the screen, citing health reasons, but everyone knew that was only the tip of the iceberg. Hollywood had no more room for Gene Hackman. The grizzled old men, symbols of a serious film era where script and acting were paramount, had become relics of the past. The industry he had helped shape had now turned into a money-making machine, where young faces, superhero franchises, and CGI films devoured all the old values. No one called for Hackman anymore. The producers and directors who once begged for his autograph now quietly forget his name, like an old, outdated memory. Gene Hackman didn't retire. Hollywood had retired. After stepping away from the silver screen, Hackman and Betsy moved to New Mexico, a quiet place with no lavish parties or glittering red carpets. People wondered why a legend like Gene Hackman would choose this place to spend his final years. The answer is simple and heartbreaking. In Hollywood, no one needed him anymore. In New Mexico, no one knew who he was. The million-dollar villa in the heart of the desert, which should have been a paradise for retirement, turned into a windowless prison. Hackman and Betsy lived quietly, almost completely detached from the world. Interview invitations gradually became fewer and eventually disappeared. There were no award ceremonies, no titles, no Lifetime Achievement Awards, as if Hollywood and the media had collectively erased his image from the list of honored icons. Gene Hackman lived his final years as a ghost king, the king of Hollywood who once wore the crown, but was later rejected and forgotten by the very kingdom he helped build. The most bitter reality for Hackman was that his final great role would never be filmed. There was no script, no director, no lights, no cameras, only 4 walls, a few aging dogs, and a wife watching the daily. The decline of the man she loved. Hackman was never afraid of death. He once said, "If I die alone one day, I won't be surprised." That's the fate of those who live too long in the limelight. But his departure was not just a biological end. It was a sentence, a brutal finale handed down by Hollywood for those brave enough to age, to refuse to bow down, and to live true to their essence. Gene Hackman didn't die from old age or illness. He died because Hollywood had killed him long before he was ever loved by Hollywood. Hollywood adored him when he was useful, but that love was as cheap as a Monday matinee ticket. When Hackman no longer brought in profits, no longer earned Oscars or provided sensational interviews, that love evaporated, disappearing as if it had never existed. Hollywood's love for Hackman was the most toxic kind. It loved him while he was valuable and discarded him when he became a burden. Gene Hackman wasn't the only one. He was just one of many icons that once lit up the Hollywood sky, only to be abandoned by that very sky. Peter O'Toole, the legend from Lawrence of Arabia, passed away quietly, unnoticed. Burt Reynolds, from sex symbol to a poor old man. Mickey Rourke, a misfit trying to find his way back into the film industry after years of being considered past his prime. Gene Hackman carried the tragedy of an entire generation. Those who dared to act from the heart, lived outside the glamorous mold, and grew old in the most natural way. His passing is not just the sorrow of a family or the loss of cinema lovers, but also a sentence for Hollywood itself, an industry that once created great icons only to trample and discard them when they no longer turned a profit. Betsy once said in her final speech, "Gene always knew who he was. It was Hollywood that forgot. The verdict for Gene Hackman had been handed down long ago, but his passing is the final chapter. Hollywood didn't kill Gene Hackman in a day. It killed him piece by piece through neglect, turning its back on the cheapest love a former king could ever receive. Gene Hackman passed away on a gloomy afternoon, without fanfare, without trumpets. The news of his death was as quiet as the last years of his life spent in the New Mexico desert, where no one bothered to search for Gene Hackman's name on the Hollywood map. There was no national memorial, no crowds lining up outside his gate to place flowers or light candles. Just a few short news reports, a couple of shallow articles summarizing his career, and that was it. Gene Hackman was once a legend, but when the curtain fell, he was just another old name, dusty in the public's memory, buried beneath stacks of legal documents, tax returns, and his final will. People discovered fragments, untold stories. Hackman's will not only determined the fate of his multi-million-dollar estate, but also raised a series of significant questions about what he had kept hidden for decades. An unnamed portion of his assets, investments, and transactions carried out through foreign companies formed a financial maze that even his personal lawyer couldn't fully unravel. Why did a man who once declared his disdain for wealthy tax evaders get involved in such ambiguous dealings outside of the U.S.? Why, before his death, did he repeatedly request updates to his will, cutting off some relatives, adding strange names, and even leaving unexplained sums to an anonymous NGO? Gene Hackman passed away, leaving behind a web of mysteries that remain unsolved. Gene Hackman's death was initially reported as due to old age and complications from chronic heart disease. However, independent reports from several local newspapers in New Mexico began circulating a chilling theory: toxic gas inside Hackman's home. A small amount of carbon monoxide was found in his old mansion. The ventilation system, just sufficient enough, was believed to have caused fatigue-induced hallucinations, gradually weakening his health. What was striking, however, was that this system had been inspected just months before Hackman's sudden death, and at that time, there were no signs of any leaks. Was this simply an accident, or was someone intentionally turning the multi-million-dollar estate into a deadly trap? Could Hackman's financial secrets be connected to this mysterious death? Local authorities opened an investigation, but as Hollywood lost interest, everything fell into silence. Leslie cried in front of the media, not only because she had lost her father, but also due to the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She thought that after years of estrangement, Hackman and she had finally reconciled, but the cold, ruthless, and calculated final will told a different story. When a legend falls, it isn't just tears that fall, but also blood, betrayal, and wounds that never heal. If Hollywood were a house, Gene Hackman was the one who built every brick. But when he passed away, Hollywood didn't look back. No official memorial, no special film festivals to honor him. In fact, some of the younger people in the industry began asking each other, "Who is Gene Hackman?" And so Hollywood, where glory and oblivion are separated by just a breath, shifted their attention to younger, more marketable stars, leaving Hackman's legacy behind. Gene Hackman, once hailed as the unthroned king of Hollywood, ultimately passed away as a stranger on the very land he bled and shed tears to build. They no longer needed him, and his death was no more than a small notice lost amid a flurry of cheap entertainment news. But the tapes were never made. The public, Hackman's family, remained silent. The media gradually forgot, and Gene Hackman's secrets went with him to the grave, at least until someone finds the courage or cruelty to unearth them. One day, those recordings may leak, and when they do, the world will learn that Gene Hackman did not simply die from age or illness, but from the dark secrets that had shadowed him his entire life. But that day has yet to come. The curtain has fallen, and Gene Hackman, the betrayed king, is now nothing more than a ghost in Hollywood. Gene Hackman has gone, taking his rotting secrets to the grave, leaving behind not a gift, but a blood curse. A legacy where those who survive must pay with tears, suspicion, and an agony that never heals. We can only wonder, will the truth about Gene Hackman ever be revealed, or will it remain one of the unsolved mysteries forever? Share your thoughts about this story in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on exciting content. See you in the next video.